Hello friends, welcome to AI Flux. Today we got some really incredible news from Nvidia, and that news is that they actually aren't going to be able to export the A100 or H100 GPUs to the Middle East and a handful of other countries. Now, it might seem like Joe Biden and the US government just really is afraid of what AI might do, but there are actually some really curious geopolitical implications here, and also just implications as to what Nvidia's future might look like. So let's get into it. So for those of you who don't know, one of the biggest AI powerhouses outside of China and the US is actually the Middle East. A government-funded research institute in Abu Dhabi is actually what gave us one of the best open source LLMs available today, Falcon 40B. And to say that there's AI development going on in the Middle East is a huge understatement. However, the US government is really worried about this, and the reasons are maybe more complex than you would think. So the only way we found out about this is Nvidia, like many other big technology companies, has to make quarterly reports speaking to their profits and speaking to future challenges to those profits. So within this, Nvidia pretty much disclosed that the Biden administration has told them that they will require an export license for the A100 and H100 GPUs going forward. And there are a number of reasons that were stated for this. So in this announcement, Nvidia said, during the second quarter of fiscal year 2024, the US government informed us of an additional licensing requirement for a subset of A100 and H100 products destined to certain customers in other regions, including some countries in the Middle East. We have sold alternative products in China not subject to the license requirements, such as our A800 or H800 offerings. Curiously, this is a very multifaceted problem. So the affected chips, again, are only the H100 and A100, arguably the most powerful and most usable for AI training that Nvidia makes. Although Nvidia disclosed these new limitations in their US regulatory filing, the company didn't really reveal which countries in the Middle East are specifically impacted by these controls. We can assume most of the United Arab Emirates, and likely specifically the same research institutions in Abu Dhabi. And what's curious about this is still just the hardware. So people who are renting GPUs on AWS or like with platforms like VAST aren't still really geofenced. And it'll be curious if we get there as well. But basically the verbiage of this announcement from the US government is pretty much pointing to preventing servers and GPUs being used to create AI in China and or being resold as rentals in China. And the reasoning for this is predominantly for defense, but AI is now seen as an existential threat in terms of technology. And although the Biden administration has faltered in other areas of foreign policy, like in Ukraine, I would say that they've really bolstered their policy in terms of regulating the heck out of GPUs, doing this to protect Taiwan, and curiously, someone in the background here really knows what they're doing with this policy. So over the last few years, both Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been strengthening their AI prowess in multiple ways, predominantly using Nvidia's chips. Curiously, there's certain members of the royal family in Saudi Arabia that are actually some of the largest single purchasers of Nvidia GPUs. Some of them have even purchased more GPUs than all of Tesla or that Elon even purchased for Twitter, now called X. And the core concern here is that Saudi Arabia and the UAE have been in talks with China to deepen their collaborations, not just in terms of weapons contracts, but in terms of research, mindshare, and a number of other economic factors. Furthermore, Saudi Arabia entered into a strategic alliance with China, committing to work collaboratively on artificial intelligence projects, which is a glaring problem for the US government. Now, you can argue there may have been other ways diplomatically to avoid this, but right now, cutting off Nvidia's GPUs to them is a big one. And it doesn't come without consequences, right? Because Nvidia is one of America's biggest tech companies. It's now valued at over $1 trillion. And we really have to think, at what point is the government's kind of malfeasance, the US government, at what point does that harm Nvidia to an extent that it becomes a question of what they're really even doing? And to hammer down even further, the US government is now concerned that Nvidia's A100 and H100 compute GPUs could be diverted to China from customers in the Middle East. So for instance, straw purchasers in the Middle East could say, look, I'll buy a bunch of GPUs and then I'll turn to, say, China or maybe even Russia, and then get a nice markup, make some money, then that's that. The US is also worried about Chinese companies training AI models overseas due to a lack of domestic shortage of top AI GPUs, and then just bringing the technology back to China that way. Now, what Nvidia has said is, despite these new restrictions, Nvidia has said that the licensing requirement does not significantly impact the company's revenue, and that the company is working with the US government to address the issue, which basically means they're begging the Biden administration to stop pulling this crazy stuff and at least give them a bigger warning in advance. At least in markets, especially with Nvidia and tech companies, stuff that's happening suddenly like this is not a great look. So Nvidia is likely just trying to say, why don't we just give us more time before you tell us. And there are actually more insidious reasons here. So, the US government statement, it reads in a way that they don't really want to tick off the Saudis, right? But another really insidious thing that's going on here is it's been known for quite some time that in Saudi Arabia, they've actually been hiring a number of Chinese AI researchers that weren't able to get visas in America. They've trained Falcon 40B further, which still leads in the field right up until Llama 2 was released last month. There are bigger questions as to where alliances lie in the Middle East as well. For instance, we know that the Russian Lancet drones that are being used in Ukraine definitely use the Nvidia Jetson DK1, which is kind of interesting. So curiously, there's been no real regulation on embedded Nvidia products. There are also still automotive companies that are selling LiDARs. Curiously, the same LiDARs that are used in cruise autonomous vehicles that are also used in Lancets for targeting. So do you think that the US government is overstepping their bounds here? Do you think that AI is still a massive threat and is something that should be regulated in similar ways to ITAR, which is actually what's used globally and is enforced by the US government to regulate weapons transactions and production? Tell me what you think. I think this is actually one of the more interesting projects, just in that there's facets in the US government, there's facets abroad. It generally benefits Taiwan, and curiously, Nvidia is right in the middle of this entire thing. I'm still going to hold on to my Nvidia stock. Don't take that as investing advice. But yeah, let me know what you think. And as always, I hope you learned something. And if you like our video, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.